Do you think you know the story of Hercules? What if I told you that there are secrets no one has ever shared about the greatest hero in Greek mythology? Get ready for a journey full of betrayals, impossible challenges, and a fate that will surprise you from start to finish. Hercules wasn't just a hero with unbeatable strength, but a man marked by tragedies and divine vengeance. You'll discover what really happened behind his famous 12 labors, the price he paid for being the son of Zeus, and how his legend became immortal. Stay with me until the end and see how the truth about Hercules will change everything you thought you knew about him. Long before he was known as Hercules, the boy was named Alcides, in honor of his great-grandfather Alcaeus, a legendary warrior. The name carried strength and greatness, but no one could have imagined the destiny that awaited this child. His birth was not just a common event. Right from his first cry, Mount Olympus watched every step he would take. Alcmene, his mother, felt there was something special about her son. He was different from other babies. His eyes shone with a unique intensity, and his strength was astonishing from the very start. Even without knowing the truth about his origin, she sensed that he carried something extraordinary within him. His mortal father Amphitryon, a brave Theban general, was proud of his son, though he never imagined how deeply his lineage was tied to the gods themselves. At that time, Alcides was just a boy, unaware of the divine intrigues shaping his destiny. Time passed, and as he grew, he would come to realize that his life was not his own. There were much greater forces at play behind the scenes, manipulating his path for better or worse. His true name would soon be left behind, as his story was destined to be so grand that a new name would emerge, a name that would echo through eternity: Hercules. Alcides' fate began to take shape long before his birth, when Zeus, the king of the gods, laid his eyes on Alcmene. She was a woman of rare beauty and great virtue, married to Amphitryon, a respected Theban general. But to Zeus, mortal promises meant nothing. He desired Alcmene, and nothing in the world could stop him from having her. Knowing she was faithful to her husband, Zeus devised a cunning plan. While Amphitryon was away, fighting enemies in a military campaign, the god took on the form of the general, and under the perfect disguise appeared before Alcmene. His gaze, his manner, his voice, everything was identical to the real Amphitryon. She had no reason to suspect, but Zeus was not content with just one night. To ensure his seed became powerful, he prolonged the magical union. He ordered the sun not to rise for 3 full days, making that one night seem eternal. During this time, he slept with Alcmene, convincing her that he was truly her husband, just back from war. When the real dawn finally arrived, and the illusion shattered, Alcmene had no idea she had lain with a god. Her womb already carried a child whose destiny would change the world. However, Mount Olympus was not a place of silence, and this divine betrayal would soon reach the ears of someone who would never forgive: Hera, Zeus' wife. Time passed, and Alcmene noticed something strange happening. Her husband, Amphitryon, returned from war shortly after that unforgettable night. He arrived full of longing, hoping to finally reunite with her. But when she greeted him, there was a silent confusion in her gaze. "You came back so quickly?" Alcmene asked, not realizing the impact of her words. Amphitryon frowned. He hadn't returned early. To him, it was supposed to be a moment of reunion. But then, who had lain with Alcmene? Filled with doubt and suspicion, the general sought answers from Tiresias, the famous blind prophet of Thebes. Only he could reveal the truth hidden behind that mystery. The old seer, known for his wisdom and divine curses, listened carefully and soon realized what had happened. "Amphitryon, your wife did not betray you," said Tiresias, his voice full of mystery. "But she lay with another, one who cannot be fought." Amphitryon's heart raced. "Who?" His voice trembled as if he already knew the answer but feared hearing it. The seer leaned forward and whispered, "Zeus." The truth hit like thunder. Amphitryon didn't know whether to feel rage, fear, or despair. His own home had been the stage for a divine game. His pride as a warrior was wounded, but he knew fighting against Zeus was futile. After all, how could one fight the king of the gods? But as Amphitryon processed this revelation, something much greater began to take shape in the skies. On Mount Olympus, someone was already grinding their teeth with hate. Hera had finally learned of her husband's betrayal. The truth was bitter, but Amphitryon was not an ordinary man. Any other would have felt humiliated, overcome with jealousy or the desire for revenge. But he knew the stories of Zeus. He knew the king of the gods did as he pleased, and opposing him was useless. Instead of fury, a strange pride grew within him. His wife had been chosen by Zeus himself. His son, the one about to be born, would carry divine blood. He wouldn't just be a prince of Thebes, but someone destined for great deeds. That night, instead of confronting Alcmene, he took her in his arms and with a firm smile said, "It doesn't matter where his blood comes from. I'll raise him as my own son, and he will be strong like a true Theban warrior." To reinforce his role as a father, Amphitryon decided that he should also father a child with Alcmene. So, he slept with her that very night, unaware that he was giving birth to something even more unusual, two twins with different fathers. But while Amphitryon accepted his fate, Mount Olympus was seething. Hera, betrayed once more, would not accept this affront in silence. The queen of the gods' hatred grew like a storm, and she began to prepare her revenge against the unborn child. From high above Olympus, Hera watched it all with eyes filled with fury. Once again, Zeus humiliated her by taking another woman as his lover and fathering yet another bastard child. But this time, the betrayal seemed even worse because this child wouldn't be a mere mortal. He carried the blood of the king, of the gods. Hera knew she couldn't prevent the child's birth, but that didn't mean she couldn't destroy his life. If Zeus wanted that bastard to thrive, she would ensure his path was filled with pain and suffering. As the months passed and Alcmene's belly grew, Hera schemed. She couldn't attack the woman directly. Zeus had placed his protection on her, but the baby was still vulnerable. The goddess swore that as soon as he came into the world, she would crush him before he could become a threat. But to ensure her blow was fatal, Hera needed more than just hatred. She needed a foolproof plan, something that would not only strike at Zeus's son, but also his destiny. That's when she had an idea. She would use Zeus's very promises against him. With a cruel gaze, Hera descended from Olympus and went to the king of the gods. With sweet words and an innocent look, she made a request to her husband. "Zeus, my beloved husband, swear by the river Styx that any descendant of Perseus born today will be king over all others." Zeus, distracted and confident, smiled when he heard this. Alcmene was also a descendant of Perseus, and her child was about to be born. Unaware of the trap, he swore. The moment the words left his mouth, Hera smiled. The promise was made, and now she just needed one more move to seal the fate of Zeus's bastard son. Zeus would never break a vow made by the Styx River, the most sacred of divine pacts. If a god swore an oath by that river, not even he could go back on it without suffering terrible consequences. And Hera knew this better than anyone. With Zeus's vow ensuring that the first descendant of Perseus born would become king, Hera had everything she needed to manipulate the destiny of her husband's bastard son. Her plan was simple but cruel, to ensure that Alcides was not the first to be born. At that moment, another woman from Perseus's lineage was also pregnant. Nisippe, the wife of King Sthenelus of Mycenae, she was expecting a child, but the time for labor had not yet come. However, that would not be a problem for the Queen of Olympus. Hera descended from the heavens and with a simple touch hastened the birth of Nitip's baby, ensuring that he would be born before Alcides. His name was Eurystheus, and he would be crowned king, while Zeus's true son would lose his right to the throne. At the same time, the goddess prepared another part of her plan. If she could hasten one birth, she could also delay another, and that's exactly what she did. When Alcmena began to feel labor pains, Hera sent Ilithyia, the goddess of childbirth, to prevent the child from being born. For hours and hours, Alcmena suffered in agony, unable to give birth. Her body wanted to expel the baby, but something invisible seemed to keep him inside. Meanwhile, in another palace, Eurystheus was already crying in his mother's arms, and Zeus's oath had already been fulfilled. The throne that should belong to Alcmena's son now belonged to another. It was only thanks to the cleverness of Galanthus, Alcmena's servant, that the spell was broken. Suspecting Ilithyia's presence, the servant tricked the goddess by suddenly shouting, "Congratulations, my lady! The baby is born!" Startled and unwilling to break her own role in the birth, Ilithyia relaxed the spell for a moment. And that was all it took. In a final effort, Alcmena finally brought her child into the world, but it was too late. Hercules had lost his right to the throne, and Eurystheus would rule in his place. From the heights of Olympus, Hera smiled. Her blow had been precise. Now Zeus's bastard would have to live as a mere subject of the one who was supposed to serve him, and this was just the beginning of the suffering she had in store for him. Hera's plan had worked perfectly. While Alcmena screamed in pain, unable to give birth, little Eurystheus had already been born, and by Zeus's oath was destined to become king. Exhausted and desperate, Alcmena couldn't understand what was happening. The contractions were strong, but something invisible held the child inside her. It was as if a divine force was preventing the birth. In the corner of the room, Ilithyia, the goddess of childbirth sent by Hera, remained seated, arms crossed, muttering enchantments. As long as she was there, the child would never be born. But fate sometimes can be treacherous, even for the gods. Galanthus, one of Alcmena's most loyal servants, noticed that Ilithyia was behaving strangely. While everyone in the room was running back and forth trying to help, the goddess remained motionless, with a faint, malicious smile on her lips. Galanthus had a bold hunch and decided to test it. She approached the entrance of the room and, with a triumphant shout, exclaimed, "Congratulations, my lady! The baby is born!" The shock was instant. Ilithyia, taken by surprise, jumped to her feet and opened her arms, unintentionally interrupting the spell. At that moment, Alcmena's body reacted, and with one last cry of pain, her son was finally born. Galanthus laughed in satisfaction as she saw the goddess realize her mistake. Furious at having been deceived by a mortal, Ilithyia snarled and cast a curse on the servant, turning her into a weasel. But it no longer mattered. The baby had been born, and nothing could change that. Alcides, Zeus's son, was in the world. But while the mother held the baby in her arms, relieved to finally have him with her, the boy's fate had already been sealed. He would not be king. His throne had been stolen. And more than that, he already had a mortal enemy in the heavens, who would not rest until she saw him destroyed. The joy of Alcides' birth was brief. The little baby, with his visible strength, did not know that fate had been stolen from him before his first cry. Eurystheus, Alcides' cousin, now occupied the throne of Mycenae thanks to Hera's relentless plan. Alcmena and Amphitryon, though deeply in love with their son, could not change the course of things. The throne that should belong to Alcides now belonged to another. He would be treated as a prince, but the royal title was beyond his reach, and the shadow of the new king would always loom over him. Zeus, upon seeing the birth of his son, recognized Alcides' greatness and potential, but he knew that, due to his oath, he could not intervene directly. The pain that filled his heart upon realizing that the son he loved most would never be king was deep, but he could not violate the promise made under the Styx. So, he tried to make up for it by sending him special gifts, superhuman strength, unbeatable endurance, and unparalleled courage. However, none of that could give him back what had already been lost. Meanwhile, in the palace of Mycenae, Eurystheus took the throne with an arrogant smile on his face. No one knew that, behind his appearance as a just king, fear and insecurity consumed his heart. Eurystheus knew that even though he was king, he did not possess Alcides' strength. He lacked the courage and spirit of a true hero. And that, more than anything else, terrified him. And Hera, watching from afar, felt that her victory was complete. The hero's fate was sealed. Alcides would live under the shadow of a throne that did not belong to him, while Eurystheus would rule not by his own power, but through the manipulation of the gods. The goddess's anger grew, but she knew there were still more challenges to impose on the young hero. And this would not be the last blow from the Queen of Olympus. The world had changed. Alcmena and Amphitryon, though they felt completely loved by their son Alcides, could not ignore the weight of fate that surrounded him. They knew that, despite his immense strength, the boy's life would be full of challenges and trials he could never imagine. But the true surprise was about to happen. When Alcmena gave birth, she didn't bring just one child into the world, but two. Two boys, twins, with similar traits, but separate destinies. The first, Alcides, who was already magnificent from birth, with muscles seemingly made for battle and penetrating eyes that reflected an unwavering inner strength. The second, Iphicles, Alcides' brother, but with a far more tranquil destiny, free from the heavy responsibilities of a hero. The revelation that Zeus's son had a twin brother from a mortal father took everyone by surprise. The population of Thebes, who knew the legend of Alcides, now found themselves facing a new and fascinating story. Who could have predicted that Perseus's powerful lineage would be represented by two such distinct sons? While Alcides was marked by divine blood, Iphicles lived with his feet on the ground, completely free from the immense shadow of his celestial lineage. Despite having the same face, the two boys walked different paths. Alcides grew under the watchful eyes of war masters and the war of the gods, while Iphicles spent more time with the peasants and laborers of Thebes, learning the ways of humility and resilience. But while one was shaped to be a hero, the other merely observed, knowing that somewhere his twin brother was part of something greater, a destiny that even the gods themselves could not comprehend. However, Iphicles' presence was never merely passive. Somehow he felt that something was about to happen, something that would bind his fate to his brothers in a way that neither he nor the gods could predict. Hera's anger, after all her efforts to ensure Alcides would not be king, did not subside. The goddess knew that although fate had taken the throne from her son, he still posed a threat. An imminent danger, not just to Eurystheus, but to all of Olympus. Hera knew that Alcides' power was beyond many people's understanding, and his heroic nature, born of divine blood, would make him stronger with each challenge he faced. Even if he were treated as a mortal, nothing could erase his lineage. And for Hera, that was a threat. She dedicated herself to destroying Alcides' potential with the same obsession she had used to try to prevent his birth. But now, her attacks would be more subtle. She could not directly attack Zeus's son. Doing so could lead to a war against her own husband. Therefore, she would use a more subtle, calculated approach. The goddess began to act behind the scenes, never showing her face, but always manipulating events to test the limits of Alcides. First, she incited hatred among the people around him, provoking jealousy and mistrust between the hero's friends and allies. She knew he would be invulnerable to physical battles, but he couldn't endure the emotional pain caused by intrigues and betrayal. But this was just the beginning. She knew that if Alcides were weakened in his soul, if he grew desperate and lost hope, he could fall into the abyss of insanity, which would give Hera her ultimate victory. And that was the next step in her plan. In her cruel mind, she already envisioned the future. The chaos she sowed in his life would push the hero to the brink of his mental and emotional endurance. Alcides, as always, remained steadfast. But with each step, he felt the weight of the invisible forces pushing him toward the precipice. He didn't know who was behind it, but the hatred and fury that chased him grew more intense and unbearable. It was as if an invisible presence had entered his life, making everything darker and heavier. The fate of Alcides was about to become even darker, but the real battle for Hercules was yet to come. When Alcides and Iphicles were still babies, a calm night fell over Thebes. But while the city slept, the winds blowing over the mountains carried an omen. Hera, in her rising fury, had not given up on her mission to destroy Alcides before he even understood his power. In the dead of night, two gigantic serpents, with eyes like glowing coals, silently slithered into the twins' room. They were a gift from Hera, a test, an obstacle to overcome. The goddess believed that over time baby Alcides would lose his strength and become more vulnerable. Not that she truly hoped to kill him, but she wanted to see his first defeat, and nothing could be more humiliating than that. As they entered the room, the serpents began to crawl toward the crib. The room, once lit by the soft glow of torches, now seemed dark and filled with an invisible evil. But something extraordinary happened. When one of the serpents approached Alcides' crib, he, still in his infancy, turned, as if instinctively sensing the threat. With a scream of rage, the baby, with a strength that defied explanation, grabbed one of the serpent's heads with his small but immensely powerful hands and broke its neck. Iphicles, terrified, cried upon seeing the scene but didn't understand what was happening. He was a mere mortal with no strength beyond that which life gave him. But Alcides, he was on another level. With a childish war cry, he grabbed the second serpent that was still trying to attack, strangling it in a way that seemed impossible for a baby only a few months old. What happened next was a wave of astonishment that swept over everyone in Thebes. When Iphicles' screams woke the city, the dead serpents lay at his feet, and in the center of the scene was Alcides, a baby who had already defeated evil with his own hands. The news spread quickly. The son of Zeus was not just an ordinary child. He was not someone destined for the throne, but through his actions, he had already shown that his destiny was beyond anything any man could imagine. Hera, upon discovering the failure of her attempt, became even more enraged. She couldn't let her plan fail so easily. The serpents were just the beginning. She knew that now Alcides was stronger than she had ever imagined, and she, the Queen of Olympus, would have to invent new ways to bring the hero down before he became a true god. But that night, what everyone in Thebes could see was a little hero who, with a war cry, seemed to challenge the gods themselves. And that, though terrifying for mortals, was only the beginning of a legend that would echo for generations. After the night of the serpent attack, it became clear to everyone that Alcides was no ordinary boy. The city of Thebes didn't know how to treat him. Was he a predestined hero, or a sign that the gods were toying with mortals? But to his parents, Alcmena and Amphitryon, he was just a son, even if he had unimaginable strength. And that would soon become a problem. Since he was little, Alcides demonstrated uncontrollable vigor. While playing with other children, he could, without realizing it, hurt his friends with a simple push. One day, while trying to pet a calf, he accidentally knocked the animal down with an innocent motion. His strength wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility he didn't yet understand. Amphitryon realized that his son needed to be raised with discipline. If Alcides didn't learn to control his strength, even a simple gesture could cause tragedy. So he called upon the best masters from all over Greece to train him. Autolycus, the grandson of Hermes, taught him the art of hand-to-hand combat and stealth. Eumolpus, a priest of Demeter, tried to teach him music, but soon realized that patience was not the boy's strong suit. Once frustrated with the lessons, Alcides broke his lyre in half with a single strike. Castor, brother of Pollux, taught him to ride and handle a spear. But even with so many teachers, Alcides still didn't know how to fully control his strength. The fury inside him grew as he got older. The divine blood running through his veins made him feel that he should be at war, in battle, facing challenges greater than simple lessons from a teacher. The moment that marked his youth was when, without realizing his own strength, he killed one of his teachers in a fit of rage. The music master Linus had scolded Alcides for his lack of dedication, and the young man, overcome by impulse, struck him with the lyre. The impact was so powerful that the teacher died instantly. From that day on, Alcides understood that his strength was both a gift and a curse. If he didn't control it, he would bring destruction wherever he went. Feeling guilty, he decided to step back for a while and dedicated himself even more to training, now with a new mentor who would be crucial to his destiny, the wise centaur Chiron. His training had only just begun, and his transformation into a hero was far from complete. But one thing was certain: Hercules was not a mere mortal. Time passed, and with it Alcides' understanding of his strength deepened. He knew he couldn't continue his life with a heart heavy with guilt, nor with the feeling that his own nature was a threat to others. Therefore, he decided to seek a mentor who could teach him to control his strength and understand the true purpose of his gifts. That's how he found Chiron, the wise centaur who lived in the Pelian Mountains. Chiron was no ordinary centaur. He was the son of Cronus, the Titan, and was known for his wisdom, kindness, and above all, his skill in teaching. Many legendary heroes such as Asclepius, Jason, and Achilles had been his disciples. Alcides then set out for the mountains, where he found him meditating by the riverbank. When the young hero arrived, Chiron looked at him calmly, observing him in a way that seemed to see more than he showed. "You seek to control your strength," Chiron said in a serene voice. "But before anything else, you need to understand yourself." Alcides, impatient, wanted to start the physical training right away. But Chiron imposed an important lesson on him. Strength without control is just destruction. Training with Chiron wasn't easy. Unlike his other teachers, the centaur didn't use brute force as his method. He taught Alcides to use his mind, to study war tactics, medicine, and the art of dealing with others. The lessons in combat were not just about physical strength, but about intelligent strategies and wisdom in battle. Chiron taught him to communicate with nature, to understand healing through plants, and to protect others rather than use them as mere targets. In his long months of training, Alcides learned more than he ever imagined. But despite all the wisdom he acquired, the fury that still burned within him could never be fully extinguished. During one of his first combat lessons, Chiron did something unexpected. He faced Alcides in a friendly duel. Alcides, filled with the energy of his divine blood, attacked without hesitation. But Chiron, with his wisdom and agility, easily neutralized him, using a blow that made Alcides fall to his knees. The young man, dazed, looked at the centaur, now breathing heavily, but with a serene smile on his face. "You still have much to learn, my young one. Strength is not just physical, it is also emotional, mental, and spiritual. Never forget that." It was at that moment that Alcides truly understood the value of training with Chiron. His master's wisdom was not limited to technique or strength, but to a life philosophy that transformed war into an art. By the end of his time with Chiron, Alcides was not only stronger, but also wiser. He now knew that to be a true hero, he would need more than just brute strength. He would need to learn to control his fury and use his wisdom to protect others. Alcides' journey was far from over, but he now had the tools to face whatever fate had in store for him. However, he did not know that the divine forces, especially the wrath of Hera, would still be lurking, waiting for the right moment to thrust him onto a path of suffering and trials. The training with Chiron marked a turning point in Alcides' life. He was no longer a rash, uncontrolled young man, but a disciplined, strong, and clever warrior. Yet fate demanded more from him. Theory was just the beginning. The real world would test his abilities cruelly. So when Alcides returned to Thebes, the city found a different man. His muscles were more defined, his posture was firm, and his mind sharper than ever. But a peaceful life was not meant for him. Shortly after his return, a great problem plagued Thebes. King Creon was being threatened by an army from Orchomenos, a powerful neighboring city demanding heavy tributes and enslaving the Thebans. The people suffered, and Creon, already an older man, had no warriors capable of defending his kingdom. It was then that Alcides saw his first great opportunity to prove his worth. Without hesitation, he offered to lead the armies of Thebes against the oppressors. The war was about to begin. The enemy generals mocked the young warrior who dared to face them. To them, he was nothing but a muscular peasant, incapable of defeating a real army. But they were terribly wrong. In the battle, Alcides fought like a force of nature itself. With his club, he crushed enemies as if they were toys. His war cry echoed across the field, scaring even the most experienced soldiers. When wielding his sword, his blows were precise and lethal. No man could face him on equal terms. But his victory didn't come only from brute strength. Chiron's teachings on strategy and leadership proved invaluable. Alcides commanded his troops with intelligence, surprising the enemies with unexpected tactics. The Orchomenos army, once so confident, was destroyed and forced to flee. When the dust settled and the enemies were defeated, Thebes celebrated Alcides as their savior. King Creon, in gratitude, offered the hero his daughter Megara in marriage. Alcides was no longer just a young warrior. He was a celebrated hero, a victorious leader, and a respected man. However, what Alcides didn't know was that glory was fleeting. His destiny was still entwined with Hera's wrath, and the goddess would not allow his happiness to last forever. The transformation of a simple, strong young man into a true hero was complete, but the greatest trial of his life was still to come. Alcides' victory against Orchomenos not only saved Thebes, but also made him the greatest warrior of the city. His name was celebrated, his strength admired, and his courage remembered as almost divine. As a reward, King Creon decided to seal his gratitude in a grand way by offering his daughter, Megara, in marriage. Megara was not only beautiful, she was intelligent, kind, and had a presence that captivated everyone. Her gaze carried the liveliness of a woman who understood the kingdom's politics, and her posture revealed the education of a princess who knew her worth. On the day they met for the first time, Alcides, who had faced beasts and entire armies, felt something unexpected: nervousness. Seeing her in the palace halls, dressed in a purple silk robe, he felt that no monster, warrior, or vengeful goddess had prepared him for this. "So, you are the great hero of Thebes?" asked Megara, a smile playing on her lips. Alcides laughed, flustered. He was used to dealing with armed enemies, not sharp words. "Just a warrior fighting for what he believes in," he replied. Megara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. She had expected to find a brutish man, a barbarian driven by strength. But here was someone different. In the following months, their relationship blossomed. Megara brought calm to Alcides' restless soul, and he, in turn, offered her security and protection. They married in a grand ceremony, and the people of Thebes celebrated the union of the hero and the princess as a new chapter of prosperity for the city. The marriage was happy. They had children, and for the first time in his life, Alcides found something he had never experienced: peace. But the gods rarely allowed heroes to rest. Far away on Mount Olympus, Hera watched the happiness of Zeus's bastard son. The rage inside her burned like fire, and she knew she had to act. Alcides may have conquered kingdoms and defeated armies, but the goddess of Olympus had not yet played her final card. And what was to come would forever change the hero's life. Time passed, and Alcides lived a few years of pure happiness with Megara and his children. He was no longer just a warrior, but a devoted husband and a loving father. When he wasn't training young soldiers or helping Thebes, he was at home, playing with the children and enjoying the warmth of the home he had built. But the hero's tranquility bothered someone who would never forgive him simply for existing: Hera. From high on Olympus, the queen of the gods watched his peaceful life and felt hatred boil within her. How could that bastard son of Zeus live without suffering? No matter how many times she tried to destroy him, he always rose again, stronger, more glorious. This had to end. It was then that Hera called Lysa, the goddess of madness, a cruel and relentless entity that delighted in sowing chaos in the minds of mortals. "I need you to destroy that man," Hera commanded. "Don't kill him. That would be a favor. I want him to lose everything. I want his own family's blood to stain his hands." Lysa smiled, satisfied. She had already brought kings to ruin, generals to destruction, and powerful men to insanity. Now she would have the pleasure of corrupting a hero. And so the shadow of madness descended upon Alcides. One night, while at home, the hero began to feel a strange unease. The air seemed heavy, his thoughts muddled, and a voice whispered in his mind, distorting reality. He looked at Megara and his children, and for a moment he didn't recognize them. The fog of madness spread quickly. Lysa blew illusions into his mind, making Alcides see monsters where his family was. His eyes became wild, his hands trembled, and before he knew it, he drew his sword. Megara tried to hold him back, calling his name, but he no longer heard anything. To him, they were enemies sent to destroy him. And so, the worst happened. The greatest hero of Thebes, the man who had defeated armies and monsters, became responsible for the most cruel act of his own life. When the fog finally cleared and sanity returned, Alcides looked around and saw what he had done. Megara lay fallen. His children were lifeless. The floor was covered in blood, and then the truth struck him like a bolt of lightning. His scream echoed through the night, a roar of pain, despair, and horror. The hero, who had never feared anything, fell to his knees, defeated by himself. And in Olympus, Hera smiled. She had won. The night was silent, except for the sound of a broken man. Alcides remained kneeling, his hands covered in blood, his eyes wide, unable to look away from the horror before him. The blood of his family stained the ground, the smell of death hung in the air, and the silence of Megara and the children was unbearable. He extended his hands, touching the lifeless face of his wife. What had he done? How was this possible? He only remembered flashes, distorted images, battle cries that now sounded ridiculous in the face of the terrible truth. The monsters he had seen were his own family. Reality crumbled over him like an avalanche. His children, the little ones who ran into his arms every morning, who laughed when he tossed them in the air, now lay there, lifeless, by his own hand. He raised his face to the heavens, and a scream of pain sliced through the darkness. A roar of despair, of guilt, of helplessness. The people of Thebes woke to the sound and ran to the hero's house, but upon arriving, they found only the devastating scene. A man strong as a god, now curled up on the ground, trembling like a frightened child. King Creon came quickly, but upon seeing the massacre, his face turned to pure horror. "Alcides, what have you done?" he whispered, unable to believe what he saw. The hero didn't answer. There were no words to justify this. The silence was broken when Creon, overwhelmed by fear and pain, decreed that Alcides must leave Thebes immediately. "You have become impure, cursed by the gods. Leave and never return." Alcides didn't protest. He knew he didn't deserve forgiveness. Consumed by guilt and shame, he struggled to rise, cast a final look at his destroyed family, and left alone, without a destination. He wandered for days and nights, without eating, without sleeping, without speaking. He was no longer the hero who defeated monsters. He had become one himself, but something inside him still pulsed. He needed answers, he needed redemption, and there was only one place where he could find it, the Oracle of Delphi. Alcides walked aimlessly, his feet bruised by the stony road, his body exhausted. But none of that mattered. The pain he carried was not physical, it was something far worse. The weight of guilt crushed his chest. The image of Megara and the children never left his mind. Their faces, once full of life, now were only shadows haunting every thought. "I killed them." The words echoed inside him like a hammer striking hot iron. How could he move forward after this? The invincible hero who had defeated beasts, armies, and giants, now defeated by himself. He walked down the roads, without eating, without drinking, without resting. He didn't deserve comfort, didn't deserve to live. If a bandit attacked him, if a wild animal leaped at him, he wouldn't defend himself. But no one dared approach. There was something dark about him now, an invisible weight that kept even the cruelest predators at bay. The madness of Lisa had gone, but the emptiness remained. One cold night, he threw himself by the edge of a river, staring into the dark water. What if he just gave in? What if he let the current take him? But fate would not let him escape so easily. A voice sounded in his mind, an old memory from simpler times. "Alcides, a man may fall, but what defines him is whether he rises again." It was the voice of Amphitryon, his mortal father. He remembered that day well. After a bad fall during training, young Alcides wanted to give up, but his father made him rise, shake off the dust, and move forward. Rise. Could it be possible now? He closed his eyes. There was only one way to try to atone for his crime. The answer to his torment lay in Delphi. The oracle would tell him what to do. With eyes burning and his heart heavy, Alcides stood up and made his way toward the only thread of hope he had left. The journey to Delphi was arduous. Alcides was weak, almost a ghost of the warrior he once was. He walked through dry fields, crossed rocky hills, and kept going without rest, driven by only one desire: redemption. Travelers who saw him on the road moved away. The once imposing hero now seemed a haunted man. His beard was untidy, his eyes deep and empty. But inside him, a fire still burned, a fire that demanded answers. When he finally sighted the Temple of Delphi, his legs faltered. There stood the dwelling of Apollo, the only place where he could find his fate. The priests received him with cautious glances. They knew who he was, the great Alcides, but they also knew the reason for his visit. The murmur of his tragedy had already spread. Before the sacred cave, Alcides waited in silence until the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, emerged from the darkness. Her eyes were filled with a divine light, and her voice carried the weight of prophecy. Alcides, the one who was both blessed and cursed. He lowered his head, waiting for his sentence. The Pythia's voice echoed through the temple. Your crime was terrible, but your soul can still find the path to light. Go to Mycenae, seek Eurystheus, the king chosen by Hera. He will be the instrument of your penance. Only through him can you purify your name. Alcides frowned. Eurystheus, the man who should have been his servant, but who, by Hera's interference, took his throne. The priestess continued, You will face challenges that no mortal has ever dared. 12 impossible tasks, 12 trials that will purge your soul. If you fail, your perdition will be eternal. If you triumph, you may be reborn. Alcides' heart tightened. 12 challenges. This meant his journey was far from over. But he didn't hesitate. He rose, took a deep breath, and for the first time since the tragedy, his eyes shone with determination. I will do whatever it takes. The Pythia smiled faintly, as if she already knew his answer. Then go, and may the gods have mercy on you. Without looking back, Alcides left Delphi and made his way to Mycenae. He was no longer the man he had been before. The name Alcides belonged to a past stained with blood. Now he would become something new. From that moment on, he would be called Hercules. With the weight of fate upon his shoulders, Hercules walked to Mycenae, the city where Eurystheus ruled. The man who should have been his servant now sat on the throne that, by right, should belong to him. But that didn't matter. His goal was something else. When he arrived at the palace gates, the guards hesitated. The warrior who stood before them was no ordinary man. Even weakened by guilt and pain, there was something about him that inspired fear and respect. When he was led to the throne, Eurystheus didn't hide his discomfort. He knew the fame of Hercules, and deep down, he feared the man who could one day claim what had been taken from him. But then Hera whispered in his thoughts, and a cruel smile appeared on the king's face. Have you come to surrender to the true king of Mycenae? Eurystheus taunted, crossing his arms. Hercules, emotionless, replied, I have come to atone for what I did. The oracle of Delphi said I must submit to you and complete any task you impose on me. Eurystheus laughed. This was his chance to humiliate the man who throughout his life had lived as a favorite of the gods. Very well. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a malicious idea. If you seek redemption, you will prove your strength and obedience. From now on, you will serve me, and you will have to perform 12 impossible tasks. The room fell silent. The nobles whispered among themselves. They knew that Eurystheus was not offering penance. He was signing a death sentence. But Hercules did not retreat. He simply nodded and said, Name the challenges. I will complete them. And thus began the most brutal and legendary phase of Hercules' life, the 12 labors. He did not yet know it, but these trials would not only test his strength, they would also test his soul. Hercules had accepted the 12 tasks, but Hera was not satisfied. Her hatred for Zeus's bastard son was insatiable, and seeing him try to redeem himself only fueled her wrath further. She would not allow him to triumph. From the heights of Olympus, the goddess watched every move of Hercules. When he set off for his first task, to kill the Nemean lion, Hera whispered into the wind, and the already deadly creature became even more resilient, its skin impenetrable to any weapon forged by man. When Hercules faced the Lernaean Hydra, Hera sent a massive crab to attack him, trying to distract him and ensure his defeat. But the hero, even exhausted, crushed the creature underfoot and cut off the Hydra's heads, burning each wound so they would not regenerate. With each new challenge, Hera found a new way to interfere. When he needed to capture the Ceryneian hind, Aetutai, sacred animal of Artemis, the goddess tried to provoke her sister against him. Artemis, however, knew of the trial imposed on Heracles, and even though she was furious at seeing her animal harmed, she allowed him to continue his mission. But Hera did not give up. She incited Eurystheus to make the tasks even more cruel. The king, ever more eager to see Heracles fail, added even more difficult tasks, sending the hero beyond the limits of the known world. Still, Heracles persisted. Each time Hera created an obstacle, he overcame it. Every time they tried to bring him down, he stood back up, but the goddess would not retreat. She knew that even if Heracles completed all the tasks, his life would still be far from a journey of glory. She would ensure that his story ended in tragedy, and Heracles, even being the strongest man in the world, still didn't know that his greatest battle was yet to come. The 12 labors were completed. Each feat seemed more impossible than the last, and Heracles' courage and strength never wavered. He had faced mythological creatures, challenged the gods, and overcome the greatest dangers with unwavering determination. His name was now known across every corner of the world, but the true battle of Heracles was far from a simple physical victory. Hera, with her relentless vengeance, had marked his soul in such a way that pain and tragedy still followed him, no matter his achievements. After completing the labors, Heracles sought rest, but he knew peace would never be his. He had fulfilled his mission, but his redemption was far from complete. The guilt of his past deeds, the massacre of his family, still weighed heavily upon him. Then fate played another trick on him. In a battle with King Aegeus, Heracles was poisoned, and his life began to slowly slip away. However, the gods had other plans for him. Zeus, with his penetrating gaze, observed the suffering of his son, and finally decided that the hero deserved more than a simple death. In a gesture of compassion and justice, Zeus lifted Heracles from the gates of death. He took him to Olympus, where immortality would be his reward. His suffering was coming to an end, and the peace he had long sought would finally be his. The hero was transformed. The mortal Alcides disappeared, and Heracles became a god. He was welcomed with honor among the immortals, and the weight of his earthly sins was finally lifted. No longer haunted by pain, he now took his place among the gods. But his redemption was not limited to his ascension to Olympus. Upon becoming immortal, he was able to help humans and even the gods themselves, using his strength to protect those in need. The pain and tragedy that had defined him in life were now part of his story, not his final destiny. Heracles, the man who faced all the challenges of Earth, now reigned in the heights where his name echoed for eternity. His place on Olympus was not just a reward for heroic deeds, but proof that even the greatest mistakes can be overcome. With Heracles' ascension to Olympus, the story of his life didn't end. It transformed into legend, passed down through generations, touching hearts and inspiring those who heard of his feats. His journey, full of heroism, pain, and redemption, became one of the most powerful narratives of the ancient world. Poets sang of his victories, and wise old men told his stories around the campfires. The name of Heracles became synonymous with courage, strength, and perseverance in the face of adversity. Even the humblest and weakest found inspiration in the courage of the hero, who even in the darkest hours never gave up. But his legend was not limited only to mortals. The gods remembered him too, and his presence on Olympus was never forgotten. Heracles came to be revered not only as the hero who completed the 12 labors, but as an eternal symbol of overcoming. He was now an example that even the greatest mistakes can be corrected, and that even the worst suffering can be transformed into something grand. Over time, the image of Heracles became immortalized in the arts, in statues, and in stories. He was the hero who became a god, the man who faced the wrath of the gods and emerged victorious, not by his strength, but by his courage and desire to change. His journey was more than a series of battles, more than a simple set of heroic deeds. It was a lesson in life, a message that in the end, everyone has the power to redeem themselves and find their place, no matter how dark their path had been. And so the legend of Heracles lives on forever, not just as a tale of glory, but as a light that shines through the generations, reminding us that in the end, even the most tragic heroes can achieve immortality. The story of Heracles, from the bastard, son of Zeus to immortality among the gods, will continue to be told for centuries. A testament to the fact that great journeys, with all their trials and hardships, are never in vain. And his legend, like the flame of an eternal fire, will shine forever. And so ends the extraordinary journey of Heracles, the hero who defied the gods, faced the greatest trials, and in the end, achieved immortality. His story is a powerful reminder that even the greatest challenges can be overcome with courage, perseverance, and the will to change. If you enjoyed this epic journey and want to learn more about myths, legends, and incredible characters from history, don't forget to like the video and leave your comment below. I want to know what you thought about Heracles' story. What part surprised you the most? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this, and come be a part of this journey with us. Until the next adventure, and remember, the legend lives forever.